Okay, so let's just talk a minute about what we've learned so far about solving quadratic equations. We can factor them. If they factor, that's a great way to do it. We can use the square root property. Sometimes it's all set up for that, sometimes it's not. If it's not set up for the square root property, then we have to complete the square, which is the last method that we just showed you. Now, all quadratic equations can be solved by completing the square. It's not always the easiest one, but you can do it. So somebody said, hey, I want to solve a lot of quadratic equations. I don't want to have to complete the square every time. Maybe I could come up with a formula so I wouldn't have to do that. And so that's how the quadratic formula came to be. I don't know who did that. It wasn't me. But I can show you where it comes from. Okay, so the quadratic formula is based on a quadratic equation in standard form set to 0. And by the way, a is greater than 0, meaning that leading coefficient is positive. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same process that we did in that last example. I'm going to follow the steps. Now, when my son took college algebra, his teacher gave everybody extra credit if they could derive, we call it deriving. So derive the quadratic formula. So that's how did we come up with the quadratic formula. So that's what I'm going to show you right here is how we do that. Okay, divide everything by a. Not a 9, but an a. Okay, and then we have x squared plus b over ax plus c over a equals 0. This is the constant because it doesn't have an x term, so that's going to the other side. So I'm going to have x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a. Okay, now we have to find what we're going to add to both sides. So what's going to go here, and the same thing has to go over here. Okay, when we talked about how to do this, we said you take the b over a, so whatever this is, and you're going to divide it by 2, but we're going to multiply by 1/2, and we're going to square it. So when we do that, we get b over 2a, and then we're going to square that. And that's b squared over 4a squared. Okay, that's what we want to add to both sides. This right here. Okay, here it comes. B squared over 4a squared. And we're adding that to both sides. Okay. Whew, that was tricky. All right, but that's important. And now we can factor the left-hand side. So it's going to factor into x plus, and then it's going to be whatever we had in there, which was b over 2a squared. Now the right-hand side, how are we going to work with that? Well, we don't have common denominators this time, so we have to get them. So I'm going to multiply by 4a so that I can have a 4a squared here, just like I do over here. And then that means I have to multiply the numerator by 4a as well. So then I have a negative 4ac over 4a squared plus a b squared over 4a squared. Okay, we're getting there. A couple more steps. So x plus b over 2a squared equals negative 4ac plus b squared over 4a squared. Okay, because we got the common denominators, so we can write the numerators like that. They can't be combined because they're not like terms. All right, now we can use the square root property. Take the square root of both sides, and we're going to put a plus or minus in because we don't want to forget that. On the left, we have x plus b over 2a. On the right, the numerator is going to be plus or minus the square root of negative 4ac plus b squared. And then the denominator, I can actually take the square root of that, and it's going to be 2a. All right. Now I just have to move this over into its spot. When I do that, it's going to become negative. So I get x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus. And then I'm going to have the square root. I'm going to switch it so it says b squared minus 4ac, because that's the same thing as negative 4ac plus b squared. over 2a. And then just one last step, because the denominators are the same, I can combine the numerators, or write them as one expression. Okay, there it is. That's the quadratic formula. You've probably seen that before, maybe at some point. If not, welcome to the quadratic formula. It's read the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Remember that line is under the negative b as well, okay? So there's songs about it, there's stories about it. People love the quadratic formula. It's very popular. Okay, so now if we have an equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then we can just plug in a, b, and c into the formula and simplify, okay? And we're going to show you some examples of how to do that. Now, sometimes I have students that are like, quadratic formula, I'm always going to use that. It's not always the easiest method. I'm just going to throw that in. Okay. Usually it's my last resort. Okay.